Leo's here, so I think we can start now. The crowd is rather sparse, but anyway, we'll carry on. Good evening and welcome to the fourth meeting of the Prince Edward Island Electoral Boundaries Commission. My name is Gerard Mitchell. I'm the chair of the commission. The other commissioners are on my immediate right, Lynn Murray; on my far right, Libby Shaw; on my immediate left, Kerry Carpenter; and on my far left, Elmer MacDonald. I'll make, as usual, some brief opening remarks and then turn it over to you folks to make your presentations or ask questions, whatever it is you may wish to do. As you know, the Commission is presently engaged in the process of drawing an 18-district electoral map of Prince Edward Island. The task of drawing that map has its origins in the decision of the government to hold a referendum on electoral reform in conjunction with the next provincial general election. On December the 20th, 2017, the Premier sent me a letter which was tabled in the House on the same day. In this letter he said in part, and I quote, "In the speech from the throne, the government committed to the creation of an independent map that lays out the 18 geographic boundaries inherent in the mixed member proportional model put forth in the 2016 plebiscite. To that end, we would formally request the Electoral Boundaries Commission undertake this advisory work." In short, then, the Commission's assignment is to divide the province into 18 electoral districts. Of course, the 18-district map is only part of the mixed member proportional model put forth in the 2016 plebiscite. That mixed member proportional model actually contemplates 27 members in the legislature, composed of 18 district MLAs and 9 at-large MLAs who do not have any assigned district boundaries. Since they have no boundaries, this commission is not concerned with the 9. Our only concern is the 18 district boundaries. The purpose of this meeting is for the commission to receive public input about where the various district boundaries should or should not be located on that 18 district map. To stimulate the discussion, the Commission has prepared and brought here, as is its custom, 2 sample maps which are on the wall back there. Now, the Commission is not committed to either of those maps, and it may well, in the end of the process, come up with a completely different map from the one that from either of those. When it draws an electoral map, the Commission is constrained in what it can do by Section 3 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which provides that every citizen has the right to vote. The leading authority on the right to vote in the context of fixing electoral boundaries is the Supreme Court of Canada's 1991 decision in the Carter case out of Saskatchewan. In that case, the Supreme Court of Canada held that the right to vote in Section 3 of the Charter includes the right of every citizen to have effective representation in the Legislative Assembly of the province. The Supreme Court of Canada goes on to say that the first condition of effective representation is relative parity of voting power. That is to say, one person's vote should not be diluted compared to another's. Although parity is a primary condition of effective representation, it's not the only factor worthy of consideration. Drawing electoral boundaries is not just a mathematical or exercise. Section 3 of the Charter mandates effective representation, not equality of voting power. Effective representation often cannot be achieved without taking into account certain countervailing factors, such as geography, regional issues, community history, community interests, municipal boundaries, school boundaries, minority representation, and population trends. These factors can justify some degree of deviation from equality of voting power. In Prince Edward Island, electoral districts are based on the number of registered voters. And according to the records of Elections PEI, the province has approximately 100,000 registered voters. Based on 18 parity districts, that would mean a provincial average of about 5,500 voters per district. The reason we're here tonight is to get your help in identifying any countervailing factors that have such a bearing on effective representation, particularly in this area of the province, as to justify some deviation from parity. That is to say, some deviation from the 5,500 number. Overall, it's difficult to justify much deviation on Prince Edward Island because it's so small and densely populated. It also has no significant physical barriers and has pretty good roads and communication system, and it has regional service centers, and nobody on the island, I don't think, lives more than 90 minutes away from the capital. You will note that on both sample maps, District 16 is much smaller than any of the others, and that's because such deviation is traditional and considered necessary in order to provide effective representation for the island's Acadians. In 1996, the Supreme Court of Prince Edward Island ruled in favor of special consideration for the Evangeline-Mascouche region. The Prince Edward Island Electoral Boundaries Act in Section 17.2 provides also that no district is to deviate from parity by more than 25%. Now that's sort of the background and the framework from which this commission has to work. I should also tell you, though, that we have with us this evening to help out Mr. Paul Allen, Manager of Operations and Director of Communications for Elections PEI, who will be glad to help you out with anything pertaining to the maps, and Mr. Terry Scott, our mapping technician. Terry can move boundaries around to give you an idea of if you change the boundaries, how that would look. So now, without further ado, I'd invite anyone here to come forward and make any submissions they have about the boundaries of the 18 electoral districts we're working on. This meeting is being recorded, so please state your name when you come to the microphone to speak. Thank you, and please feel free to come forward with your comments or questions.
Darcy Lanche, and this is my third trip around. The first one to Montague was just to get my bearings, and the second one in Charlottetown, it was the town of Stratford, David Dunphy's presentation that really made me think about where these lines should be drawn. Now, I don't know, I didn't do the whole island because I'm more east of the river. But I am also, just so you know, I'm the crew leader for Statistics Canada for the last 2 censuses in this area that's pretty much on the map now, ending before St. Peter's and going down to the back of Montague and then down to the Trans-Canada and back up again. Mm-hmm. So I am intimately acquainted with every little spot there. I know exactly how long it takes 14 people to knock on every door and how many kilometers they're going to use up doing that. So that's my background. And I do have a couple of suggestions that would go along with David Dunphy's suggestions, the mayor's suggestions for the town of Stratford. And don't even know. Do you want to see them or? So, if we looked at what David Dunphy wanted to do, which was to split Stratford evenly into 2 districts, both containing a bit of the town of Stratford and the surrounding area, one going up the river, and he had Piskid, but I think it might even go up a little bit further to include Mount Stewart, and the other one could go out to just past China Point, so that's the 2 districts 4 and 5. What I would also suggest is for District 1 would come out Highway 2 and go straight across the top of the province to through Rollo Bay and right out to Surrey. That District 1 should be all those fishing villages, all that common interest on the North Shore. That District 2 would include Georgetown, Montague, Brudenell, all the Cardigan, all of those communities that also have a lot in common, including the farm area in the middle. That District 3 would be the South Shore, and then 4 and 5, the north and south of Stratford. So that's
which fishing districts now would you include in District 1?
In District 1, I would start at Trackety Cross and go all the way out Highway 2 and include, of course, below the highway as well, but go all the way out and go right out to Rollo Bay.
Okay.
I assume you mean all the way to East Point, right?
Yeah, to East Point, but I mean the lower line would be like Rollo Bay.
Okay.
And then everything north of that in District 1.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I don't know how the population works out. I had to get a road map to try and superimpose it.
Can you?
And my husband had emergency eye surgery today, so I would have drawn that map for you, but I couldn't. I couldn't get Wi-Fi at the QEH today.
We're going to see if Terry maybe can work and get us some numbers on what you're.
So that's kind of my suggestion. I do agree with David Dunphy about the north and south of Stratford, that is a common interest, that area whose kids go to Stratford, who go to Stratford to the schools there, and who also use all the recreational facilities there, whose lives are more geared towards Stratford and Charlottetown than they are to Morell and Mount Stewart, and however far out we go right now. And but I do also still suggest, as I did in Charlottetown, that the municipal areas should be somewhat larger than the rural areas, because they are more dense and they do have that other level of government, that municipal level of government. So I feel they would be as equally represented even if there was more people per MLA. And of course, we're all going to end up having the same number of people per MLA, because we're not changing the number of MLAs, just the boundaries. That's me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Betty Wilcox, and I'm from Stanhope. I can understand the work that has gone into making this map, and I appreciate it very much so. I think it's a good map, and I have no problems with the 18 districts, the way you got it lined up per population. My concern is how it works with mixed member proportional representation. And I know I've talked to some people already this morning, today already about this. Now, we did have a video prepared for you that's roughly a minute, maybe a minute and a half, using this map and showing what happens with the other 9 members. That would make it a complete 27 districts, or 27 MLAs, I should say, not 27 districts. So since we were turned down with having a video, I would like to at least hand out a representation of what it might look like, because I don't want anyone get the impression that the 18 is all you're going to get and you're not going to get representation beyond that. Because those 9 who are for everyone, that's a whole different dimension, I should say, to government, and an important one. Let's say if someone in my district, let's say if I was going to go and vote for, let's say I was going to vote for PC, but a Liberal person got in for my district. So I'm going to be quite upset and say, oh, great, now I don't have a person I can connect with. But I do with those 9. And that's crucial. And so I can pick which party I would like to see rule the islands. And so if I was a PC, I would go PC. And so I do have a person that I can connect with. And so that role is so extremely important. And I realize they don't have districts because they would be for everyone. Anyone could connect with these people. So I'm going to pass out this simple little map. And I should mention as well that I'm a member of the PEI Coalition for Proportional Representation. I'm not pushing proportional representation, but at the same time, I know that you are going to be looking at indicating something on the next election. So I would think that with my map, it gives you a little better idea, and that's what this is about. So let me start off by giving all of you a map, and then I'll give you all a map as well. This is from the video. You're welcome. I'm gonna go back and teach you again. Thank you. Got you there. I can't remember. But we do have the 18 there, plus the additional 9.
Which map is this she's used? Is that the
The additional 9.
It looks to me like sample 2, just based on this
Sample
map
2.
right here.
sample 2 Carrie thinks?
Yeah, it's sample 2 because you see those jets in there.
Have you? Have you seen it? Oh, okay. I was going to say at this particular point, if anyone has a question on what I've just handed out, because we're still acknowledging the 18 districts plus. So anyone?
Mr. McEwen. Pardon me?
Well, this is a page from the video.
That's the page.
Okay.
That's
Can I ask a question?
Oh,
I don't know. I wasn't here when Betty was asking this question, but I don't know if no one in the audience has any strong objection to showing a 1.5-minute video, why we would not do that. I just have no understanding of why we would not.
Here's the problem, Leo, or Mr. Shivery, is at other meetings, some people got up and argued or attempted to argue positions for or against the MMP model. The commission is not about that, and we stopped them. So I can't start making different rules now after 3 or 4 meetings that way. That's the problem we have. We have all received this from the video from
yes, I sent it to you
from
on Friday.
Mrs. Wilcox, and but that's our difficulty is we want to be consistent.
Okay,
But you've handed this out, and if anybody's got any comments or questions about it, they're welcome to come forward.
and you'll see at the bottom on the left side, there is actually a link that you can go to take a look at the video. And apparently one person has already seen it. But any other questions or comments? No? No questions and comments?
But
Oh,
maybe,
Leo, I guess.
maybe in the interest of just the video that was there, and I want to thank, I know Betty worked on it and other people worked on it to show people. So if there's anybody here who wants to get the link to it, I'm just going to ask them if they want to
Oh, yeah.
give me their contact information, and we'll send them a link
Oh, but
to the
it's
video.
right here.
Yeah, it's on there as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, it's on there. Okay, well, I guess that's it for me then.
Well, maybe not yet. I don't know if somebody may have some questions for you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Oh, I see. That's based on the 2015 election and the popular vote. And so you see, yes, no, you're right. We should always have a legend. I was hoping people would realize that, and it's not brown, that it's orange. We couldn't get it even into a bright orange.
No.
That would be NDP. The green would be green. And the blue, of course, is PC, and the red is Liberal. So those are the four parties. But yeah, you're right. It would have been nice. That's a good comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we didn't pick, well, it's supposed to be a larger representation. Like each party will pick so many different people, from top to whatever the number happens to be. So we just wanted to show that it would be a variety of people, so it goes beyond. So there could be people with disabilities, it could be more women, it could be, like all kinds of other interests as well. Does that make sense?
Well, okay,
It's not saying this is exactly what you're going to get based on the. Okay, yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah. Actually, it becomes a little clearer with the video, I have to say. Yeah. Any other? I guess not.
Thank you then.
Yes, you do?
Well, I will just say that I noticed that it would be much easier to elect a person who has a very severe handicap, like a mobility impairment. that
Oh, yes.
Require a wheelchair, because the candidates who are wheelchair bound, and the NDP did run one in Cornwall.
I can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah, oh, all right.
Okay, you can get up there. Up and sharing it.
Well, okay. I do appreciate the fact that there is a person here represented by the wheelchair, because it's almost impossible to cover a district and go door to door, which is the expectation if you are differently abled. There was a young woman who ran in Cornwall for the NDP who was in a wheelchair, and she was completely unable to go up and down people's steps and knock on doors. But a good candidate like that, could certainly make a list and become elected. And it would be great to have someone differently abled in our legislature, and mixed member proportional is the only way that's going to happen.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for that comment. That's very true. And the other point is that we could have more women and also more Indigenous representation as well. So that would be up to the individual parties, of course. Anyone
Okay.
else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Mr. McEwen, I noticed at other meetings you had talked about concern that the school districts be within the boundaries.
Since you asked. Yeah, in the Montague meeting, one of the concerns I was talking about was, and it might be just my demographic, I've got Mary here with me today, and Betty, she was also wondering about the number of women that were on there. Well, she pointed out quickly that there wasn't enough girls on that page.
On
so,
that team.
I'm
Yeah.
with her. I'm with her.
There you go.
Yeah, I was bringing up about the school district. I think it is important. I know, especially, this last calendar year, we went through a school review process where you've seen a lot of communities come together, whether or not they were for or against a certain proposal. And I find, that school zone together is important. Now, granted, when you start going down to 18 districts, you're going to have to start splitting zones somewhere because it's just not going to work out. But, you know, and I'd asked the question, what other types of maps, whether it was fire districts or school zones or you know, what were you using? And I hope I made the point that I think the school district could, you know, trump some of those other ones, because I think that is important. I made note too that on a couple of the you know, the two maps that you guys are putting forward, that the community of Morell that I do represent is somewhat split, and especially the Morell school zone is split. Now, I know that's a in my backyard type thing, and we go along any border, we're going to see people split. In the Montague one, they talked about Valley Field being split off. But because we're in Morell tonight, I'll make that point.
Yeah,
And I know the Morell Community Council has their AGM tonight, so there would be a lot of people down there at that would make that comment about the maps being, you know, split right down the middle. I will ask a question about kind of the future plans. The last go-round, when we come up with 27 districts, we kind of floated two maps, and then we kind of edited them a bit, and then you guys decided on a final map, which I give you much credit for. Anytime that process goes smooth and nobody's screaming from the rooftops, you must have done something very right, so congratulations, because that certainly doesn't happen all the time. But I'm wondering a bit now, because we've got two maps that you've thrown out there just for discussion purposes, and what's the plan at the end of the day? Because as we know, this is just more of a suggestion to show people what MMP might look like. This certainly has no bearing on the next government or what they'd have to do, and we'd have to go back out and basically do this process again. But I do understand that, you know, the Premier had asked you guys to do this, so you've got a job to do. But is that kind of the plan, is to massage these maps, show, come to a conclusion on one map that the government or the Premier might put out to say, you know, this is what it would look like? Or are you kind of going to leave it at two maps, or what's your direction with that, if you don't mind me asking?
We will come with one map that we say, and we will say in our opinion, assuming we come to agreement that, you know, this would represent a fair and reasonable map for an 18 electoral district electoral map.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
but we will, I mean, we're taking in all of the stuff that we hear at these meetings, and we have meetings in between where we're continually working on the process, and we'll continue to do that until we get to the point where we got one that we can live with.
Yeah.
And we'll take it to the speaker.
And that'll be a report similar to last time? With
Well, it won't be as extensive, because
No, true.
we're really just asked this time for a map. So the report may be more in the form of just a letter. We haven't decided on that, but probably not as much as the last one.
Okay. And maybe I'm curious as to what kind of themes have been coming out so far. Like Darcy had talked about a different option there, and I see you guys have done a quick job of trying to rearrange that too. Darcy talked about, you know, perhaps North Shore had things in common, maybe fishing, I'm not sure, but farming, I guess, could be split right down the middle, that type of thing. You know, that kind of a bias, and I don't mean bias in a bad way, but that kind of a bias is one way to look at it. It kind of goes against what my priority would be more education related, school zones. What are kind of trends you hearing? Are you hearing like trends like that? Let's keep similar industries together, similar schools together?
Well, I think a couple of things. Municipalities are probably the number one thing to keep together that we hear. Schools would be, I think, number two, and things like fishing communities or that sort of thing would probably be about the third. We haven't heard too much about industries as such, other than, well, fishing, of course, is an industry, but that would be about the common ones, eh?
And no doubt, depends on where you're at, bearing and all
Oh,
that.
yeah, very much so, yeah. And fire districts, that's another one that,
Yeah, you're
that
right.
comes up, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the 3 is always the challenge every time.
Yeah, can't get it in 3. Yeah. So Terry's been working on the numbers
Nice job, Terry.
Very quick estimate of
Okay.
what these two maps are listed for each, but anyway.
Yeah,
Somewhere in between, but that's
I
a nice
couldn't figure
map.
out to move the printed one because it didn't have any rows on it, so.
Yeah. The member from District 1, I think he has a long district.
Well,
He need more than your bicycle.
actually, if I would address that, part of this is because of the whining of the member from District 1 at the Montague meeting
Aye.
about how difficult it was. But this puts that whole district right on Route 2. Like, this is
Yeah.
a much easier district to canvass,
Yeah.
to service, because as he's leaving town, I mean, his whole drive home
can-
is all the way through this district.
He can wave the flag all the way through.
Yeah, all the way through. To me, this is a much easier district to service than one that comes down and is a giant chunk and ends up taking in Brudenell and Cardigan and it really areas that are completely, that really do, in my way of thinking, belong with Montague.
Yeah, but then we go down to 3, District 3, and where
Yeah.
numbers are, we need some imports.
Yeah, and maybe we need to, trim that number 5 up a little bit, so to square up number 3, because really, we could certainly make number 5 a little bit smaller and get the numbers get those numbers up in District 3. But again, I think the rural ones could be a little bit less populated, and the urban ones a little bit more. But
Oh, yes. There's a couple of thousand people that kind of got moved up into 10. We've got to do something with them.
Well, and that's where the Charlottetown district should come out bigger. Like, those municipal districts should not be on the same footing as those rural North
Stratford.
Shore districts.
Can you agree with Stratford? Would you agree with Stratford being bigger?
I do agree with Stratford. I agree that Stratford should be bigger, even though it's still the fastest growing community. If you draw this map now, and it doesn't get used, unlike the other maps that are gonna go into effect like within 2 years of you drawing them usually, this map is not gonna be used until 2022. So really, or 2023, these numbers are gonna change a lot between now and then, and the ones that are gonna go up are that District 4 and 5. Those numbers are gonna be going up.
But if we put more people in them now, they're going to be going
Yeah,
through the roof.
but by then, yeah, they'll be quite a bit bigger still. But they do have that other level of government in Stratford.
Way over. Because you gotta get 3 up, you got
Yeah.
another 600 people for 3.
Yeah.
And you gotta take some of those number 10 people back in
You got
to the
to
east.
take the 10, yeah.
We can't displace all of them in Charlottetown.
There's a lady here waiting patiently first.
Hi. I was just looking at this redraft.
Name, please?
Oh, sorry, Heather Mullen. Looking at the redraft here, and I'm sorry I came in late, so I missed some of it, but I heard you talking about the fishing districts and so on. The only thing I was thinking when I'm looking at it is I'm thinking about healthcare, and if you're up in Surrey and your healthcare needs are very, very, very different than anyone on this end, and if you're representing a rural end of the island, healthcare is very different than anyone in the central area. So that's one thing that just kind of, I think that's very different for the people closer to town than anyone.
Say
East.
healthcare is very different. What are you talking about?
Access and
Access,
availability. I mean, we haven't been able to recruit physicians to Surrey and get them to stay. I mean, you've got rural hospital issues. And then anyone coming on this end of the district is not going to be concerned about those health issues. But in Surrey, I mean, don't walk down the street and not talk about healthcare, right? So I just think that I mean, fishing is all together. School zones really concerned me too. I think that what we saw this fall, when we start to represent our rural schools, what we're looking for in our schools is very different than what the central areas are looking for. So it's a little bit of a divide. I understand the fishing communities are important and the agriculture, but I kind of wonder, where the divide is and how well they're represented when they're split, because they're split everywhere else on PEI.
Thank you.
say something positive about the map in terms of what you've done, because I've noticed in previous maps they were less contiguous in terms, particularly around more urban areas, whether it be Summerside or Charlottetown, where they had stretches of pieces of it and stretching out to the side. Whereas I think this makes more sense to have them closer together and more contiguous and community of interest. The other thing I know we talked about, I know what happened at the Montague meeting, was in terms of the district in the Evangeline area is smaller because of the reality of the Acadians, but certainly I don't know other jurisdictions have done it, and it may be beyond your scope, but certainly in Nova Scotia, where they've looked at ridings in terms of whether it be both Acadians or Mi'kmaq, where they've actually looked at how can they have representation. And I know for example, even the Acadian community, then when we have French schools in West Prince, Evangeline, Summerside, Charlottetown, Rustico, St. Augustine, and Le Bas-Cloche in Surrey, then there's a reality of the Acadians across the whole province. And I don't know how that can be dealt with, but it seems to me that the reality of people or Mi'kmaq people who may live in urban areas as well as in other places on PEI, how do you make sure that their interests? So I'm thinking a purely geographical map has limitations in that regard, and that's why I think in terms of what was shown here in terms of differently able people or other people that are underrepresented shows that in actual fact more diversity will come about with that type of system. But I also think too, when we're looking at just like the Acadian area, just looking at it that one area represents all Acadians is still a bit of a limitation. Although I think as someone who's an Acadian and quite proud of my ancestry and happy that some family members are going to the Francophone school, the Bas-Cloche, that somehow how do we recognize that reality as something that might be an important thing to do. So I just want to express my appreciation of that, and also look at all the various community of interest, because they cut in various ways, whether that be in terms of gender or whether that be in terms of different people are differently abled, or whether people have the diversity in terms of what our population is, and how do we get, and I'm not sure if a purely geographic map really represents that, whereas I know the additional seats, when we look at the research around MMP or whatever, that actually in fact means that you're electing a more reflective group of people that reflect the diversity of the island.
Thank you. Anything further? Well, I want to thank you then. Numbers may have been small, but we got some good input. We thank you for that, and we'll take it in consideration along with the rest of what we've learned at the meetings, and we still receive written submissions if anybody wishes to utilize that. We'll keep on receiving them until we're done with the map. So that's another avenue that can be used. And our final meeting is Wednesday night in West Isle. So thank you all for coming, and we appreciate your taking part in the discussion.